these young guys, as soon as they, get some fame and some money and, get some, really fast cars, they just don't know how to act or be responsible. And unfortunately, it seems like someone always has to get hurt or tragically killed for them to really wake up. We're back with Football Forecast Offseason Edition. He's Kaynen Buckshot. I'm Anthony Balester. I know we've been off for a couple weeks, but we got a lot to break down, and we're back better than ever. We got to break down the Aaron Rodgers story, so we're going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers, who just signed with the Steelers, finished up his first minicamp with the Steelers. So we got to talk about that. The Baltimore Ravens, man, what an embarrassment of riches. Went out and got another great player, so we got to talk about that. Obviously, we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders, who was in the news for the wrong reason. So we got to break that down. And then we're also going to be breaking down the AFC West and their offseason reactions and what they did this offseason between the draft and free agency, and also much more. So definitely make sure to stay tuned. Make sure, though, that you following us on all social media at TFB Forecast ETB. Also, be making sure to watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. We're very close to the 1,000 subscriber mark. We just hit, I think, the 940 mark. So we're only about 50 to 60 subscribers away. So definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to check out our ETB Substack at etbnetwork.substack.com. We have all kinds of shows, MMA, basketball, baseball. So if you love sports, you like those sports in particular, definitely make sure to check us out. Also, listen to us however you listen to your podcast, whether if you listen to us on your AirPods on the go or if you listen to us on your television. Make sure you listen to our podcast however you get your podcast. And also, the show was presented by Playback, and we'll have more to discuss that later in the middle of the show. But it's great to be back, Kaynen. I know, we were both down bad for a little while. Caught a little sickness. It's that time of year. We're going from spring to summer. So I guess this is the time where a lot of people are getting sick, but it's glad to be back. How are you doing, Kaynen?
Yeah, I'm good. That was some much needed time off, I think, for the both of us. But how are you doing?
I'm doing real good, and wouldn't have been able to do the show a couple weeks ago, but definitely glad to do the show, and we picked a good week to do it. There was a lot of breaking news and a lot of stuff to break down, so let's get right into it. We had Aaron Rodgers. I know this is a few weeks old, but we definitely got to bring this on the show. Aaron Rodgers has finally picked the team that we knew from all the beginning, all along. He finally went with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just finished up his first minicamp with them, and I guess the reason why he took so long, he said, I gotta have to handle some personal things in my life, and I guess those personal things were him getting married. He showed up to minicamp and had a ring on his finger. They asked him about it. He's like, yeah, I got married a few months ago. It's crazy that a star like Aaron Rodgers could get married 2-3 months ago and keep it so under the radar that no one would know until they see the ring on his finger. So it's really crazy, but hey, I guess after all this time, maybe Aaron Rodgers decided to finally settle down, and maybe he's not going to be the same old jerk that he once was. But, they reported that, honestly, Kaynen, that the Steelers didn't even really want Rodgers as much as we thought. He was actually, I guess, their third option. I guess they really, really wanted to trade for Matthew Stafford, but the Rams didn't want to see Matthew Stafford go, so that never came to fruition. And their second option was to re-sign Justin Fields, a guy who they already had on their roster. And that's surprising because a lot of people thought when Justin Fields went to the New York Jets that it was because the Steelers just wanted to move on. It looks like, the Steelers maybe didn't want to have him or Russell Wilson, with Russell Wilson also leaving to the Giants. But I guess the Steelers tried their best to re-sign Justin Fields, and I don't know if Justin Fields was upset about what happened a year ago, with them going with Russell Wilson over him. But it looked like Justin Fields wanted a fresh start. And it's funny because now he's going to Aaron Rodgers' old team. So now the Steelers had to go with their third option, and that's Aaron Rodgers. So it's definitely surprising. I mean, I'm not a Steelers fan, but if I was, I definitely would rather have Aaron Rodgers than Justin Fields. I guess maybe the Steelers are thinking more along, long term. Obviously, Fields is the guy who maybe hasn't hit his full potential yet, and is the guy who could beat him for multiple years. Where Aaron Rodgers, you probably only can get him for about a year. So maybe that's why. I still think it's a head scratcher. I think Aaron Rodgers gives them a much better opportunity to win. Obviously, when you look at the teams that Rodgers was interested in, I guess Rodgers did kind of want to go to the Rams. He, told McVay, and I guess wanted the organization to know that he'd be willing to go there for basically the league minimum. And the Rams could have made this work. The Rams could have traded Matthew Stafford, got maybe a couple first-round picks, and then basically got Aaron Rodgers for no money. So if you think about that, the Rams, could have had Aaron Rodgers, extra draft picks, and more money to spend. And they said, screw that, we'd rather have Matthew Stafford. And then you look at the Cleveland Browns, who were desperate for a quarterback, and Kevin Stefanski has a system that kind of is ideal for Aaron Rodgers. They weren't interested either. They want to go with kind of a youth movement. And then you got the Minnesota Vikings, who Aaron Rodgers really, really wanted to go to. And I think that's why he held out for so long. And you got questions with J.J. McCarthy. He hasn't played in a regular season game. He's coming off of injury. He's still only 22 years old. And the Minnesota Vikings said, no, we want to go with the young guy and see what he's got. We don't want to, give him another red shirt year. So that's, 3 or 4 teams that didn't even really want Aaron Rodgers. So when you look at this now, it seems like the Steelers were really the only option for Rodgers. And it seems like Rodgers was not even their top option for the Steelers. So it goes to show you, where Aaron Rodgers is at this time that, with everything that's transpired with him and the Jets and his personality, a lot of teams, are definitely turned off by him. But I do think now with Aaron Rodgers in this team and in this squad, they have a much higher ceiling now. This is a team that can make it to the second round of the playoffs, and that's something that the Steelers haven't done in a long time. And I think if they can get to the second round of the playoffs, and even if this is the only year with Rodgers, I think that would be good enough. One last thing I'll say about this, Kaynen, is I think with Aaron Rodgers on this squad, I think it puts a lot of pressure on Mike Tomlin, a guy who's always had a winning record. But, after winning those, Super Bowls, it seems like he hasn't been able to get past the first round lately. And there has been added pressure on him because, yeah, they compete, and, yeah, they're always good. But when you're constantly losing the first round every year, you got to want to get some change. And, they may want to change the scenery. Mike Tomlin's been there for a while. They may decide to go into a rebuild. And honestly, Kaynen, I think if the Pittsburgh Steelers fall anything short of the second round of the playoffs, I think they're going to go into a rebuild. I think they decided they kind of have like an older roster. They kind of, did everything they can. They recycled this team for multiple years. And if Mike Tomlin loses again in the first round, it makes sense for them to just part ways with Mike Tomlin. If Mike Tomlin wants to go to television, or if Mike Tomlin wants to continue coaching for someone else, they could do that. And then they could either go with the young guy and Will Howard, or they could draft a quarterback. And then a lot of those older defensive players, they can let go as well. So I think this is a make or break year for the Steelers. If they don't make past the first round, I think they will go into a rebuild. And that's something we haven't seen the Steelers do in probably 20, 30 years. The Steelers don't typically rebuild. They kind of just retool. So we haven't seen a Steelers team do this maybe since the early 90s. So it's been a long time. And now you got T.J. Watt, who rightfully so wants a new contract. He's holding out. And that's their best player on the team. So they got to figure it out. You got guys like Myles Garrett and Matt Crosby getting contract extensions, and they have injury issues too. So there's no reason why T.J. Watt, when healthy, may be the best defensive player in football, deserves a contract. But what are your thoughts, Keenan, about Aaron Rodgers making it official going to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I like what you said about Mike Tomlin. I think it's make or break, and we heard that a lot last season with how things shook out there. But I think, despite the struggles they had last season, as always, the Steelers were a solid defensive team. And I think, getting a guy like Rodgers and DK, I think that's going to be huge for them. Not only, just for like the star factor of Rodgers and all the headlines and whatnot, but it's really useless having such a good defense that's going to steal possessions and stump the other team's offense, but you can't really capitalize on it. And I think it was huge to get those guys because you can't really do much with what they had. I mean, what are you going to do with Mason Rudolph and Freiermuth as your number one target? You know what I mean? So with Pickens and Najee leaving, I think, this was the best available thing, especially with the timeline Tomlin seems to have now.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Keenan. But, when I look at this team, yeah, they added Rodgers and they added Metcalf, but I think as a whole, they don't have a deep receiving core. I think if anything was to happen to DK Metcalf, this could get really ugly really fast. Now, one good thing is they do have a young and improving offensive line, and if you give Rodgers time in the pocket, he can dissect any defense. So I think that's going to be the main thing. If their young offensive line takes the next step to give Rodgers the protection he needs, if Metcalf can avoid any serious injury, this is definitely a team that can compete. And Rodgers seems like a different Aaron Rodgers so far in minicamp. I know it's early. He did the same thing with the Jets the first couple of weeks in minicamp and training camp. He was all happy and all smiles, and as soon as something went awry, He went back to his normal self. So we have to see what happens when they do get into midseason, or if they do have a struggle. How is Rodgers going to do in the locker room? Is he going to uplift guys, or is he going to just start pointing fingers and passing the blame on, which is what he normally does? Now, obviously, being in the Pittsburgh organization, they're not going to allow that. So I know they've had divas at wide receiver, but when it comes to quarterbacks, they like to have guys who are really good locker room guys. But so far, Aaron Rodgers has been trying to help the young guys out. He's been trying to help Will Howard out as much as he can. That's not something Aaron Rodgers is usually known for. He probably wasn't the biggest supporter of Jordan Love, but he does seem like he's helping out Will Howard a little bit more than he helped out Jordan Love. He took a pay cut. He definitely took less money to go there. He's trying to do the best he can so that his team can try to facilitate players around them. So we definitely shall see how this is all going to turn out for Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I can't wait to see Kaynen, especially now when you look at week 1. We're going to get the New York Jets against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's got to be one of the top games of week 1, and maybe if not for the whole season. I mean, Aaron Rodgers going up against his old team, Justin Fields going up against his old team. As a Bills fan, obviously I got to root for Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers because I can't root for the Jets. But, man, if the Jets go out there and beat Pittsburgh, how is that going to look on Aaron Rodgers? The team that, gave up on you and then took Pittsburgh's quarterback, the one that they wanted to resign, and then beat you. Oh, man, that's going to really hurt Aaron Rodgers' ego, and we know how big that is. But what are your thoughts, Kaynen, on that week 1 matchup between the Jets and the Steelers?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a real crazy matchup. And like you said, if the Steelers lose it, what's that say for Rodgers? I mean, he's going to have his foot in his mouth because, all the Rodgers fans were saying, well, it's the Jets. What do you expect them to do on the Jets? Well, Fields can get it done. I mean, there's really no more excuses for Rodgers.
100%. And I think one thing that's going to favor Justin Fields is, Aaron Rodgers was considered an above-average mobile quarterback, but compared to the mobile quarterbacks now, he's considered average. He's not really mobile. And being, in his 40s and coming off that torn Achilles, he doesn't have the same mobility anymore. He doesn't seem to want to take hits as he used to anymore. And you look at Justin Fields, outside of maybe Lamar Jackson and a couple other guys, Justin Fields is one of the most fastest and athletic quarterbacks in the National Football League. We saw what he was doing when he was running like crazy with the Chicago Bears. So I think maybe because of his athletic ability, he may be a better fit for where the New York Jets are. Now, the New York Jets obviously had brought in offensive linemen, so they had improved that. But now when you look at the Jets team, where now you go from, an immobile quarterback to one of the most athletic quarterbacks with an improved offensive line, that might be the recipe to fixing the Jets. Obviously, with Aaron Glenn being a defensive head coach, he'll have that defense back to what it used to be. But then when you look at Justin Fields, if he can, move around the pocket, get some extra time, and hit guys like Garrett Wilson, who he played with in college, he's already got the chemistry built. Who knows? This actually might be an upgrade. Now, to me, I think it's a downgrade because of how great I think Aaron Rodgers is. But in terms of stylistically and the way they play and where this Jets team is, Justin Fields may give them a different threat that Aaron Rodgers couldn't. And who knows? That might be a difference in week 1. And that week 1 game is going to be so crucial for Pittsburgh because win or lose for the Jets obviously know this year they're not really trying to compete. They are, but they're really not. I feel like they're probably about a year or two away. They got a new coach, new quarterback. Where the Steelers, they have to win. This is their year for the Steelers. And if you go in there and you get punched in the mouth by your old team, and Aaron Rodgers, his ego starts to get hurt and he starts to be this bad locker room guy, it could go downhill fast. So this week 1 game is going to be really huge. If they go out there and win it, that's going to be a huge momentum boost for them and for Aaron Rodgers, to get back at his old team. But if not, it could definitely go bad very quickly. Speaking of another team who's in the Steelers division, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens continue to add to what has turned out to be one of the most impressive rosters in the National Football League. They went on to sign Jaire Alexander, who, when healthy, is one of the top 10 corners in the National Football League. The guy said he's entered the league has been a complete shutdown corner. At his best, he probably was a top 3 corner in football, but he's starting to get a little older now for the cornerback position. Cornerbacks don't play a long time. Once they get into their late 20s, early 30s, they do start to lose a little speed, and once they lose a step, they're never the same. Jaire Alexander being now 28 years old with the injuries, you got to see how he responds. But if we get anything like the prime or even close to the prime Jaire Alexander and he's healthy, he's going to be a tremendous asset. And I still think he's got some good football left in. This was a tremendous pick for Baltimore. I think at this point, Kaynen, since they have such an embarrassment of riches on both sides of the ball, there can't be any excuse for Lamar Jackson now. Lamar Jackson has, for the most part of his career, had a solid defense. And now he's going to have a solid defense, but also having, top weapons on the offense. Lamar Jackson now has Derrick Henry, the most physical opposing back in football, top 3 back, Hall of Famer. You got Zay Flowers, the number 1 receiver. You got Isaiah Likely, you got Rashad Bateman. You got a decent offensive line. And now when you look at the additions that this team has made, particularly in the secondary, I wouldn't be surprised if the Baltimore Ravens have the best secondary in all of football next year. I mean, you got Marlon Humphrey, who's one of the best corners in the league. They drafted Nate Wiggins last year, who's also unbelievable. He had a great rookie season. Now you add in Jaleel Alexander. You got 2 of the most versatile safeties now with Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks. That secondary is going to give any receiver group problems. And then you look at what they have defensive line and at linebacker, there's really not many weaknesses on this team. Maybe they're not overly deep at edge rusher, so we have to see how they do at that position. But, they brought in Mike Green, and I think that's going to help out that position as well. So, honestly, Kaynen, there's definitely no excuses for Lamar. I know we always compare Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, but I feel like they're 2 completely different stories. We've seen Josh Allen time in and time again play great in these playoff games, and his defense is giving up 30 points. Where Lamar Jackson, outside of last year, the defense plays good, but Lamar Jackson's the one that holds him back. He has tremendous regular seasons and doesn't play good in the postseason. And what we have to stop doing, as the NFL media or sports media, is we have to stop treating every loss as equal. Not every loss is equal. Just because 2 teams lose doesn't mean they lost for the same reasons. So just because Josh Allen is losing to Mahomes or in the playoffs and Lamar Jackson doesn't mean that they're both choking. You got to look at how they're playing in their losses. And Josh Allen plays great in most of their losses, where Lamar Jackson hasn't been. Now, last year, in the second half against the Bills, Lamar Jackson did play really well and did put his team in a position to win. And then he had some blunders by his tight ends and his receivers. So now we got to see, is this going to be the year they're going to put all together? Is this going to be the year where Lamar Jackson plays good and the defense and the players around them play good? But at this point, I don't want to hear any excuses. I know Josh Allen has some good players, but Josh Allen does not have nearly the talent that Lamar Jackson has on his team. So this has got to be the year for the Baltimore Ravens. But what are your thoughts, Kaynen, on Jaleel Alexander going to the Ravens?
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said, like how although we haven't really seen Jaire Alexander perform how he has in the past, he's still a solid corner and he's like top caliber. So I think he's going to get a lot of use in Baltimore because like you said, he's lockdown coverage guy. And that's someone who Baltimore really needs, someone who you could throw into your defense. He's proven he could do his job. Like, that's such a great safety blanket. Especially talking about the Ravens, where when you get into, like, back-heavy sets where you have a bunch of D-backs on the field, late in the game, close games where we've seen the Ravens kind of fall short, that's huge for them. And I'm really impressed on how they built this defense, especially the secondary, like you said.
Yeah, Kaynen, I know I'm not going to make my Super Bowl prediction now, but as much as I want to see my Buffalo Bills win it, and maybe they will because we got to see how Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen in the playoffs happens. But if Lamar Jackson comes to play and he plays in the playoffs like he did last year, I really don't see any team, including the Kansas City Chiefs, that can beat this Baltimore Ravens team. I mean, they have everything you want with the tight ends, the receivers, and the running backs. And I already said, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry is probably the most unstoppable duo in football. And now when you add this secondary who's going to be able to shut down quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes and Joe Burrow, or at least be able to limit them a little bit, this has got to be the year for the Ravens. And like I said, I don't want to say my pick now, but I feel like when it comes to saying who's going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl next year, I feel like right now I might have to lean towards the Ravens with just how talented they are. But ultimately it's going to come down to how they perform in the playoffs, and we shall see. I know Lamar Jackson is a guy who works really hard and does, do everything he can to put himself in the best position. So this is definitely, like we said with the Steelers, another team in the Baltimore Ravens where it's going to be a make or break here. And as great as Derrick Henry is and how physically opposing he is, running backs don't play that long. And, Derrick Henry is an exception to the rule. He delivers the blows a lot more than, he takes the hits. He's running over people more so than he's getting hit. So, he's not your normal, 30, 31-year-old running back. So instead of seeing him decline at, 30 like most guys, he might see him be in his prime until 33, 34. But at the end of the day, they do have a small window. And I think that their window, is between, last year, this year, and maybe next year. That's probably their 3-year window. After that, you don't know what Derrick Henry is going to be because in 2027, you're looking at a 33-year-old running back who's had so many carries. So they have to get it done this year, if not next year. But I really think, Kaynen, this is the year for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens to get it done. Again, staying in the AFC North, the Cleveland Browns, Shedeur Sanders, a guy who I've supported a lot on this show, is in the news for the wrong reasons. He was cited for doing 101 miles an hour, and he was speeding. And at first I'm like, damn, like, what a bad mistake. But it's just one mistake. Hopefully he can learn from it. Come to find out, it's the second time he's done it in the last month. So, they say once it happens twice, that's more of a trend than a habit than it is just a one-time occurrence. So we shall see if this is going to be a recurring thing, Kaynen. But before I dig deep into this, what are your thoughts about Shedeur speeding twice in the last month?
Yeah, I think you see, especially when you see a speed like 160, you're like, whoa, what the heck? But that seems to be a trend in the league, not just this league. There's a lot of young guys who, get in trouble for speeding, especially in college. Look at Georgia. I mean, that's like DUI University. They had so many players like with charges, racing, DUIs, this and that. I mean, it's tough to see, especially with Shedeur, who is under a microscope, really. That's really not going to help his image, but I guess we got to be thankful no one got hurt, and, it's just a speeding ticket.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Kaynen. You definitely articulated that perfectly. I don't like the trend that this is coming in. Like you said, Georgia has become DYU University. That's the best way of putting it. But yeah, they have been known for speeding, and then now you look at, you've seen what the tragics that has happened, and like you said, Kaynen, thank God no one got hurt from this. But this is why this has to stop. But I'm not sure why, when these players, like you said, in all sports, even in NBA now, you see with Zach Edey, these young guys, as soon as they, get some fame and some money and, get some, really fast cars, they just don't know how to act or be responsible. And unfortunately, it seems like someone always has to get hurt or tragically killed for them to really wake up. And I think that's why, Henry Ruggs, I think, when, you seen what he did with his apology to the family, his incident should have been a wake-up call to everybody. And I think Henry Ruggs, when he does get out and does become free again, I think Henry Ruggs should try to be an outlet for these young guys and let them know, like, what could be the consequences of their mistakes. And, when you make these types of mistakes, like Henry Ruggs, he could, rebuild himself, get out of jail, try to make something better and help out the youth. But at the end of the day, the person that's injured in that vehicle who can't get their life back, you can't change that. You can't reverse someone dying. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to prevent these because there's some things that you can't take back. And I definitely hope that this does stop. But now that it being twice, it's definitely a head scratcher and definitely not a good look. We even seen, the tragedies that happened with Carmine Lacey, where even just a little, mistake, reckless driving could cause someone to get killed. And then, you can't deal with the burden of someone dying that you end up taking your own life. So with all these happening, you think these players would see this and realize they don't want to be a part of it. But at the end of the day, it's just they keep thinking like, hey, that's not going to be me. I know what I'm doing. I do it all the time. And that's probably the scary part, Kaynen, is we're only seeing the times that these guys get caught. If they're getting caught this many times, they're probably doing it on a regular basis. They're just not getting caught, and they probably feel invincible until something does bad happen. So it's definitely something that we definitely have to, nip in the butt. And I wish all these players could wake up. And it's unfortunate, Kaynen, for Shedeur Sanders, because as a 5th-round pick, this is a guy who has to earn every single thing. He has to go in there and work so hard and earn the respect of the players and the coaches and do everything he can, especially when you're in a 4 quarterback battle for the starting job. Everything you do is so important. And you have to put your best foot forward. And up to this point, he has. He's been doing very well in minicamp to the point where he's been significantly outperforming Dylan Gabriel. And they started giving him 4th-string reps. And by the end of minicamp, he was up to the 2nd-string reps. So he's looking like he's a great pocket passer. He's making smart decisions with the ball in practice and really been impressing coaches. And, every time you hear him talk in interviews, he sounds very, very smart, saying the right things. They asked him, do you feel, slighted by not getting many reps? And his attitude was, no, I'm going to make the most of my reps, and that's what it is. And you just got to love his mentality. But then when you see him doing stuff like this, it's like, when you're a 5th-round pick, little things like this can be a difference of you making the roster or not. Especially when you're a guy who didn't drop because of your talent, you drop because of what they feel as you as a person. His personality is what caused him to drop. And now his personality is what's holding him back again. So for a guy that I supported a lot, Kaynen, I definitely I question him a little bit. I still think he can go out there, earn the job, and end up being the starter by the end of the season. But, man, Deion Sanders definitely had to be upset, and Deion Sanders probably gave him a huge earful. And hopefully Shedeur Sanders wakes up and, continues to not only perform on the field, but also continue to do the right things off the field as well. The Football Forecast is presented by Playback. Watching sports is fun, but it's more fun with others. We spend way too much time watching it alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, from repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Now back to the show. Now we're going to go back into our offseason breakdowns. And this week we're doing the AFC West. And we got to start with the Kansas City Chiefs, the team who's been the reigning dynasty. Now, obviously, they came up short in the Super Bowl last year. So they got a huge chip on the shoulder to prove to everybody that this is not the end of the dynasty, that the Kansas City Chiefs are still the team to beat. So they went on and made some moves, Kaynen. But before I break them down, what are your thoughts, Kaynen, on what the Kansas City Chiefs did this offseason to put themselves back into winning the Super Bowls again?
Yeah, I think despite what people may think, because they made the Super Bowl last season and they've had such a good track record, I think this was the team with like the most to prove this offseason. They had a lot of problems, and that's starting with the O-line. And for what they had and what they could do, I think they did a pretty good job addressing that problem. They traded away their best lineman, Joe Thuney, which may seem wild at first, but that allowed them to retain Trey Smith, some other linemen, and pick up Jalen Moore, who filled in for Trent Williams in San Francisco. And although he really hasn't proven himself much this yet, he seems to have a lot of upside. So I think they did a pretty good job with that. They drafted Josh Simmons, the tackle. I know he's had some issues, but he could potentially be the future of that offensive line. And another guy that they drafted is Jalen Royals, the wide receiver. I thought that was a huge play. They need targets, especially with Kelsey kind of, considering retirement. We don't know what he's doing for the long term. So that's the only note I could give them, was maybe focus more on the receiving core. I know they picked up a running back, but other than that, I think they did a really good job. What about you, Anthony? What do you think?
Yeah, they definitely did a great job, Kaynen. Like you said, you thought at first when they traded Joe Thuney that you were scratching your head saying your offensive line was already, the weak part. Why would you trade away one of your 3 All-Pros? But like you said, that enabled them to save money and enabled them to re-sign some of their guys. They were also able to keep Nick Bolton and some other guys. They did lose Trayshawn Wharton, the co-partner to Chris Jones along the defensive tackle. So that's a huge loss. But they did go out and draft Omar Norman Lott. He's a big defensive tackle from Tennessee. So I think he could come right in and be serviceable alongside Chris Jones, who is the best defensive tackle in football. And like you said, Ken, they brought in 2 offensive tackles to help the line. Jalen Moore, a very high potential guy who hasn't played a lot, but definitely has a high ceiling from San Francisco. And Josh Simmons, who did a tremendous job for Ohio State and then had the injury. But they said, Keenan, if this guy is fully healthy, he probably is going to end up being their starting left tackle as a rookie. He'll obviously have his growing pains. But Kansas City Chiefs think that this was the perfect fit. This was the guy they wanted the most in the draft. And they believe that this guy's going to end up being the franchise blindside protector for Pat Mahomes. And then when you look at some of the other guys they drafted, they did draft Galletti, the pass rusher from Louisville. So they had to add to that pass rush. They got Noel Williams, a corner from Cal, who I really like. He could play safety and corner and was really one of the best defensive backs in all college football. So I really, really like that move. Obviously, the Jalen Royals move at the receiver was a good pick. And honestly, Kaynen, once they get healthy at wide receiver, and once Rashee Rice, once his suspension's over and he's fully healthy, I really like the guys they got. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, those guys could all fly. And then now you add Jalen Royals. I think that's going to be one of the best groups of receivers that Pat Mahomes has had in a long time. And then you look at some of their other free agent picks. They got Kristen Fulton from the Chargers, who was a really good corner. I really like that pick. They added to their safety Mike Edwards, so that's really important. And then the main thing is they got Travis Kelce to come back for 1 year. Obviously, he's not the same Travis Kelce as he once was, but he's still probably one of the top 5, top 10 tight ends in football, and he always comes up big in the big moments. So just having him as a guy in the locker room, having him back is tremendously important for them. But a team who is trying to surpass the Kansas City Chiefs, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now a second year with Jim Harbaugh. We know Jim Harbaugh builds his teams up really quickly, and usually that second year, Harbaugh's teams are usually really, really dominant. And they made some tremendous picks as well to really put themselves in a position to where maybe this is the first year that Mahomes doesn't win this division, and maybe it's Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert and the Chargers that surpasses them. But what are your thoughts, Kane, on what the Chargers did this offseason?
Yeah, the Chargers. I like the Chargers. I mean, they've kind of been a what-if team, but I love the addition of Najee Harris. They drafted Amarian Hampton. And just having a reliable back like that you can lean on and that's going to work for you, is workhorse. And that's something those guys will do. We've seen what they've done through the tape. That's going to take a lot of pressure off Herbert and allow him to kind of open his game up as the field opens up. Another thing they did, they added Mekhi Becton from the Eagles. I think that's huge. That's going to help the run. He's a big body, and that's going to help protect Herbert because we all know he can ball. He just really hasn't had the team around him that allowed him to make it very far. And I think one of the biggest problems with him is they really haven't found anyone to fill the shoes of Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, like those guys. Now they have McConkey, and he's pretty solid, and they just drafted Trey Harris, but that's still a big question is who's Herbert going to throw to? Who's going to be his number one guy?
Yeah, that's definitely a question, Keenan. And, it's a position that they've been trying to improve. But like you said, Keenan, offensive line was definitely the one position that it felt like Justin Herbert has never had. Justin Herbert has never really had the offensive line. I know they were a little bit better last year, but they still weren't great. Now, I think with the Mekhi Becton pick, I think that kind of solidifies their offensive line. I think now at all 5 positions on the offensive line, interior and at the tackle position, I think that they're solid. I think that was the one position that they needed. So now that Herbert finally has the protection, we finally can see it. Can Herbert get it done in the playoffs? We see now twice him choking the playoffs and play bad in the second half. He did it against Jacksonville, and then he did it against last year against the Houston Texans. So we shall see what Justin Herbert can do. But, they are putting the team in front of them to give them the best chance. And they did lose J.K. Dobbins, but J.K. Dobbins was a running back that was great, but he was never really healthy, and he was always in and out of the lineup. Now you bring in 2 guys, so now if you lose one of them, you're still going to be solid at running back. And like you said, Keenan, Najee Harris has been a tremendous back for the Steelers. He's a great change of pace guy who could do all the hard-nosed running. He could also catch the ball as well. And we've seen him split time with a guy like Jaylen Warren last year. So Najee Harris doesn't necessarily have to be an every down back that gets all the snaps. He can, have another running back to kind of make him stay healthy. And now you're bringing a guy like Omar Hampton, who probably will be the number 1 running back either by the end of this year or by 2026. I think that's a great combo. I think that's probably one of the best duos in football, and that's probably a better duo than what Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren were for the Steelers. So now Justin Herbert doesn't have to worry about whether his running back's going to be healthy because he's got 2 studs now. And then, like you said, they brought back Mike Williams. They bring in Trey Harris, who was one of the best college receivers in college football last year. The guy's got decent size. He runs great routes. He's got great hands. He can pretty much do it all. So you look at what he could do with this team with Ladd McConkey, who I believe even as a rookie last year, established himself as a number one receiver. He's one of the bright young stars in the NFL. And then you got Quentin Johnson, who has catch issues, but when he's on, he's a touchdown machine. So if Quentin Johnson could take the next step, if Trey Harris could be something special, if Mike Williams could get anything out of him, this is a receiver core that could definitely be much improved. Mekhi Becton, like I said, that was a tremendous pick for their offensive line. They did bring in Dante Jackson. They kind of replaced Kristen Fulton, the guy who went to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that's a little bit of a downgrade, but they had to bring in someone that was serviceable, and he's definitely a good enough starter. They let Joey Bosa walk. They did re-sign Khalil Mack, but they let Joey Bosa go. And that made most sense because he's making a decent amount of money, and he's always hurt, and he doesn't seem like to be the same player as he once was. So the writing was on the wall. It seemed like the Chargers were going to move on from him after this year. He's on the Buffalo on a one-year prove-it deal, and I think that's exactly where Joey Bosa is at his career, being 30 years old with the injuries. He needs to be a guy who's kind of on a short-term deal that doesn't really necessarily pay a lot of money. And then they also went out and they drafted Kyle Kennard, who was one of the best sack artists in college football last year to help that depth, that pass rush. And then to help out their run defense, they drafted Jamar Caldwell from Oregon. And they also brought in Deshaun Hand to help out that defensive line. So we know with Harbaugh, the defense is probably going to be solid. It looks like the offensive line is going to be solid. So like you said, Kane, it's going to come down to how is Justin Herbert going to play in the big games and in the playoffs, and how is this offensive line going to hold up? But if those two things work out well, we've seen when they played the Chiefs last year, both those games were one possession. That could have gone either way. So it seems like if those two things happen, if Justin Herbert takes the next step and offensive line plays good, Jim Harbaugh and them could be the team that finally, upset the Chiefs and end the Chiefs' streak of winning the AFC West. And then when you look at the Denver Broncos, this is another team, Kaynen. I mean, this division has three really, really solid teams, three teams that are definitely playoff caliber. And the Denver Broncos, who really shocked everybody by going all the way to the playoffs, this is a team that looks like they're going to be much better than they were last year. So maybe even if it's not the Chargers that can beat the Chiefs, it could also be the Denver Broncos. What are your thoughts, Ken, on what the Broncos did?
Yeah, like you said, I think they all took us by surprise. So I'm expecting them to come out hot this season. They were one of the teams I thought needed a crazy offseason as well. And they certainly did it. They had a really busy offseason. They signed guys like J.K. Dobbins, Evan Ingram, Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga. And I like all those moves because those are all guys who are proven, and they prove that they can be a difference maker if the circumstances are right. Like you said with J.K. Dobbins, when he's on, he's on. When he's hurt, can't do nothing. So I think adding those guys to this team that seemed a few pieces away, who knows if that could be the remedy for them and where they could maybe make a push to be playoff contenders.
Yeah, and I think, Kaden, the only thing that could possibly hurt the Broncos, because we see it all the time, is Bo Nix going to have a sophomore slump. We've seen quarterbacks come out, if they're firing on all cylinders their rookie year, teams get game tape, and then those rookie quarterbacks their second year kind of take a step back and then take two steps forward their third year. So I really think, Ken, that could be the only thing that could hurt this Broncos team is if Bo Nix, slightly struggles and teams kind of figure out what he likes to do and take away what he does best. And then he struggles a little bit, and then maybe we see his third year that this Broncos team really, really play well. But with Sean Payton, who's great with quarterbacks, he should be able to limit a lot of that sophomore slump. And, I'll break down a lot of stuff you said, Kane. They had a really young receiver core last year. I know Cortland Sutton was the one veteran guy, but Marvin Mims was a young guy with a lot of potential. Troy Franklin was a young guy with a lot of potential. Devon Valet, he showed tremendous potential as a rookie and actually moved up the depth chart pretty well last year, was one of their surprises. So now you get all those guys now in his second or third year. They should take the next step with Cortland Sutton. And then they went out and got Evan Ingram to help out at the tight end position. They drafted Pat Bryant from Illinois, who's a big physical receiver who could catch, and he's been flashing a lot in minicamp. So now that gives the Broncos maybe about 5 receivers that they can really depend on, along with a tight end. So they definitely improved their passing game, which was definitely one of the weaker spots of their team. Running back was another position that was kind of weak last year. They let Javonte Williams walk, and they went out and drafted R.J. Harvey, who already, I guess, has been showing flashes, and they expect maybe him to be a huge breakout star. Like you said, Ken, they also got J.K. Dobbins. So now if J.K. Dobbins does have any injury, you still got the rookie R.J. Harvey. They got the guy from Notre Dame who they drafted last year, Audrey Estime. So I think out of those three guys, they should get one stud out of those guys. And then on a defense that was one of the best in football last year, to go out and get guys like Drew Greenlaw, who, again, has injuries, but when healthy plays like a Pro Bowl level linebacker, Huafanga, a Pro Bowl level safety, and then they go out, and draft Jahad Barron, who was one of the best defensive backs in all of college football. I think he won the award for best defensive back in college football. You add him to a secondary that has the defensive player of the year, Patrick Tan. Patrick Tan's probably the best corner in football. You got Riley Moss. So this team is going to probably have one of the best secondaries in football. Now you add in Huafanga with those guys. I mean, not too many teams are going to have a better trio at corner than them, maybe except for the Baltimore Ravens. So a defense that was already good and maybe even already great could potentially end up being, if I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being the best defense in football next year. So if that receiver core takes the next step, Bo Nix doesn't have a sophomore slump. This is a team that's going to be right there with the Chargers and the Chiefs. And ultimately, even if the Chiefs do win the division, it's not going to be like a landslide like it's been. They're not going to have 13, 14 wins, and then the Chargers and the Broncos are going to be sitting there with 8, 9, or 10. I think this is a division that everybody's going to go back and forth. I wouldn't be surprised if all these teams just split with each other. They play each other twice a year. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas City, the Chargers, and the Broncos just all go 1-1 against each other. And at the end of the year, we're seeing, maybe the Chiefs, even if they are first, they might only be an 11-win team, and the other two teams are 9 and 10 wins. I really think it's going to be that close. So even if the Chiefs can get past this great Broncos team and the Chargers, I don't think that they'll have a good enough record to be the number one seed like they have been in years past. Now, there is one team in the division, Kaynen, to where, they might not be competing and no one's going to probably predict them to go to the playoffs, but damn, they definitely improved their roster, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders. This is a team that went out. They got Pete Carroll now. They added some great players offensively, defensively. So this is a team that, may not be in a playoff position, but it's definitely not going to be a team that you could just sneeze over and just say, oh, that's an automatic W. You're going to have to earn it when you play against this Raiders team. What are your thoughts, Ken, on what the Raiders did?
Yeah, I liked what the Raiders did. They had a wild offseason as well. They got Geno Smith, Jeremy Chin, Raheem Mostert. I like all those guys for that team. I think that's a good fit. And I'm a big fan of Geno Smith. I liked what he did with Seattle last year. He's just really methodical when he puts the ball in there. So I think he's going to have a solid season with them. I like the Ashton Genty pick, as you know. I think he has the potential to be like the next great running back, the next Saquon, whoever you want to call it, the best in the league. Because he said it best, it's tackle football. Wouldn't the best player in the league be the guy who can't get tackled? And I truly believe that his ability to absorb contact and maintain balance is tremendous. And I think he's going to make an immediate impact on that team. Whether that results in them getting a bunch of wins, I'm not so sure of, but I think Genty's going to have a good season.
Yeah, I agree, Ken. And now this team may have, in the future, this could be a team that maybe potentially have the best tight end in football in Brock Bowers. We've seen as a rookie, he was pretty much the best tight end in football. And now you add in this generational running back in Genty, who I agree with you, Keenan. I think in 2-3 years, he could be the best running back in football. And if you got the best tight end, the best running back in football, that right there is going to already put you in a position to compete. Yeah, Geno Smith may not be a top 10 quarterback and may not be, the ideal franchise quarterback, but he's definitely serviceable enough. He's definitely right around, above average, right around that 15th best quarterback range, and still a tremendous upgrade over what they had last year in Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. And then when you look at what this team had at running back, I mean, you can make an argument this team probably had the worst running back group last year and one of the worst quarterback groups. Now you add in Geno Smith, who's a top 15 quarterback, and you add in Genty, who maybe as a rookie could be a top 10 running back. That's a tremendous upgrade either way. And then when you look at what also this team did, they definitely had one of the poorest receiving cores. So they drafted 2 studs in the draft in Jack Beck and Deontay Dorton. Dorton's a guy who didn't really flash in college, but he's like 6'4", 6'5", and he can run like a 4.2, 4.3. So he's a guy who has all the potential in the world, and if Pete Carroll can get out of him, you got a stud. And then you look at Jake Beck, who's another guy who may be a little tall, He's a guy who actually played really well and put up great numbers in college. So when you add these two guys, obviously this receiver core is still going to be one of the weaker ones, but it's definitely much improved last year to go along, obviously, with Jacoby Myers, who's serviceable. They got Alex Kappa, who's a decent guard to help out with the offensive line. And then a defense that, has Max Crosby, it has some decent players. They went and added to that. They added 2 solid linebackers. They got Jermaine Pratt, who was just cut from the Bengals. They got him very, very quickly. They didn't wait no time. It was like a couple of days, maybe even the day after he got cut, they signed him. So you bring him in. He's a very impactful linebacker, maybe not Pro Bowl or All-Pro, but rating that tier under that. And then Landon Roberts, who's also a really good linebacker. So these are 2 tackling machines. Pratt could also cover too. So this gives them 2 great linebackers who are going to be able to play right behind Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby to give Max Crosby some support. And then this was a team that's also trying to improve what was last year, a very inconsistent secondary. They went out and signed Jeremy Chin, who's kind of like a Derwin James. He's like a guy who can play multiple positions. He's really big and physical. And then they also got Eric Stokes, who has injury issues, but when he's healthy, he can play as well. If they can get the best out of him, I mean, he was a former first-round pick. He played at Georgia. He played at the Packers. They can get the best out of him. He could definitely be a servable starting corner. And then they drafted one of the most highest ceiling corners in the draft in Darian Porter. This guy's like 6'2", 6'3". I won't even be surprised if he's 6'4". And the guy runs like a 4'2", 4'3". He reminds me a lot like what Seattle had with Tyreek Woolen. And I think that's what Pete Carroll thinks that they're going to get out of him. So he's a guy who has tremendous potential. And honestly, usually the Raiders defense has been usually pretty competitive, except for the secondary. So if they get that secondary figured out, and now with Pete Carroll trying to help out with the offense, this is going to be a team that may not be, a playoff team, but may not be also one of the worst teams either. They may be just a middle of the road team, but that's much better than what the Raiders have been getting before. But that's going to do it for everything we have today. Definitely make sure to be following us on all social media at TFB Forecast ETB. Make sure to watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. Check out our Substack at etbnetwork.substack.com. Listen to us however you listen to your podcast. And finally, the show was presented by Playback. We'll catch you guys next week.